Well, hello, my name's Andy Tidy and welcome to another edition of Canal Hunter. Today's edition is really rather special to me. I've strayed well away from the Birmingham Canal navigations, and this time I'm here in the far-flung east. I am in East Anglia, in Norfolk, and I am having a look at the North Walsham and Dilham Canal. The reason the North Walsham and Dilham Canal is special is at two levels. Firstly, it's the only true canal in East Anglia. There are other river navigations, like the Aylsham navigation, which follows the River Bure, but this is a pure canal that runs alongside the River Ant, and it runs for 9 miles, more or less, and it runs from the Broads at Dilham up to the feeder ponds at Antingham Ponds. But there's more to this than just the uniqueness of the waterway. This is where I came from. This is Ahab territory. I was raised just a few miles away, and I was at school in North Walsham, just a couple of miles up the road, for about 9 years. That was during the 1960s and 1970s. While we as a family were busy exploring the canals of the Midlands, I was always aware of the North Walsham and Dilham Canal. So back in the 1970s, the mill pool was absolutely choked up with reeds. There was an old steam dredger that sat out in the middle, hadn't been used for decades. The mill was still being used as a proper mill for animal feeds, and the lock stood abandoned beside it. The bottom gates were gone, the top gates, they were still in place holding the water back, but they had been barricaded up with sandbags, and that was the way the position stood for decades. Upstream from Ebridge Mill, back in the 70s, it was completely unnavigable. Downstream, it was still just possible to get a canoe from here down to Dilham. But even as the 70s drew to a close, that became impossible too. So that was the scene that I was used to here at Ebridge Mill. And then suddenly it all changed. The North Walsham and Dilham Canal was built in 1825, and it was built as an agricultural canal, 9 miles long, included 6 locks, including the one here at Ebridge. And being an agricultural canal, the aim was to move produce. It was there to move corn, fertilisers, that kind of thing. So it was never big volumes. There was a hope that they would use it to bring coal up, but in the end they realised it was simply easier to load coal onto the beach at Bacton and bring it over on horse and traps into the town. So the canal never actually carried any coal. The craft using this canal weren't narrowboats, they were small wherries, and they held up to about 20 tonnes of goods. And they plied their way up and down, sometimes under sail. They had masts on them, so when you look at the bridges, you'll find the bridges have no towpaths, but they're quite high arched, and that was to allow the sailing boats to claw underneath them. If they had wind, they would be pulled up by the wind. Sometimes they were pushed up with a pole called a quant. There never was masses of trade on this canal, but what there was finally dwindled away. And by 1923 there were just 6 wherries using the canal, and that's when it came to a conclusion. The section of canal above Swafield was closed in 1893 and officially abandoned in 1923. And the demise of the canal was really hurried up when there was a huge storm in August 1912, and it washed out a section of the canal and the canal breached. There was a bodged repair, but basically it didn't last long. It was the same storm that raged its way down the River Bure Valley and washed out the Aylsham navigation as well. The last craft to use the canal was the wherry Ella, and that left Bacton Wood lock in 1923. And it's that wherry that today's trip boat is named after. There's a full history of this canal on the East Anglian Waterways website, so if you want to see that and lots of old pictures, that's the place to go. Now, I'm not going to explore the whole of the canal. What I'm going to look at is the section from here to Swafield, and the reason I'm interested in it is because it's being restored. It's one of the unsung restoration heroes of the canal movement here in 2019. And I think it's true to say that Laurie Ashton is the kingpin of this canal restoration. I may have got my facts slightly wrong here, but from what I understand, Laurie owns the watermill up at Bacton Wood Lock, which is the next lock up. he restored it, wanted to bring water to it, and the only way of bringing water into the mill was to bring it down the old canal channel. And as is so often the way, once you get interested in canals, they really grip you, and he seemed to move from being a mill restorer to a canal restorer. But the issue was getting rights to work on this section of canal. The canal was owned by the North Walsham Canal Company, and through Laurie they bought the next 2 pounds up, and they formed the Old Canal Company. That gave them the entitlement to work on the canal bed. Imagine my surprise when 10 years ago I came here to Ebridge Mill to take a look at the canal, as I often did, and I discovered that the mill pool was completely clear. It had been dredged out. And they'd cleared it out. The group of volunteers working ever so regularly had transformed the place. The problem came when they came to fill it up with water, and that's when the Environment Agency got a little bit twitched about it. They're never the easiest bunch to get on with, and well, litigation followed, and it all worked out all right in the end, but it was a bit painful from what I can gather. And yeah, the thing is, they've now got a good mile in water, and they've got the next lock-up rebuilt, which is what we're going to look at next. And beyond that, they're working on the next section of channel, and from that they can then divert the water down and operate the trip boat up through here, from here up through the next lock. And not content with just having the pound and the lock at Bacton Wood operating, they've also started work on the lock right beside me here at Ebridge. They've put new gates in, which will control the water better, and it's the first step towards rewatering the next section of canal all the way down to Briggate. Then you're well on the way to a fully restored canal. So for this canal hunt, we're going to do a little bit of bridge hopping. We're going to work our way quickly up through the next section of canals and see how the restoration of the upper section of the North Walsham and Dilham Canal is progressing. So let's go and see what we can see. So this is the far end of the Ebridge Pound, and this is at Spa Common. And as you can see, the canal is well dug out and very well defined. And crossing to the other side of the Spa Common Bridge, you can see the canal continuing on in water. So let's go and take a walk up that footpath to the left, see what we can see. What we have here is absolutely amazing. Bacton Wood Lock was completely derelict and falling down, and under their own power the little team of restorers have actually fully rebuilt it. And not just rebuilt it, it's a functioning lock. It's even got lock gates. Come around and have a look. The restoration team have gone to enormous trouble to try and maintain the authenticity of this lock. So yeah, sure, it's pretty much built up from the ground upwards. I mean, if you look down there at the waterline, you can see a bit of the old lock, the old wall. But the rest upwards is all new. It's got all new gates put onto it. These balance beams, they are the old style of balance beams. I'll show you some originals up on the top gates, but these have been manufactured to sympathetically blend in with what was there before. As you can see, the canal sits in water, just waiting for a boat to come in and rise up into the next pound. Now this is one of the original cast balance beams. You can see in here how the metal is all pitted from the casting process. This particular gate had been snapped here. That's why it's got two plates welded either side to keep it strong. It's got a bracing beam, which again is the original, and you can see more of the gnarly old castings in here. And this is a classic of the North Walsham and Dilham Canal. That's the paddle gear. It's hanging in there, hasn't got anything at the bottom at the moment. And if you look just in here, it says Cubit of North Walsham. So it was cast specifically for this canal. So this is the top gates in their closed position. And these gates are so well hung that just by pulling on the water side of them, you can actually open them up and close them down again. There we go. One lock fully open. Just waiting for a boat. Oh, and of course, waiting for some water. This is the canal bed on the other side. It's all cleaned out, it's all proper depth. It's just waiting for a flow to come down. So we'll go and look for the water in a bit. So that's the canal bed heading off to the western side of Bacton Wood Lock. And the start of this whole process can be seen in here. This is the old mill stream, and the mill stream leads along, and the idea is when the surplus water comes down here, the extra water will come down this channel and run through the old water mill. That will make one fantastic site. So that is Bacton Wood Lock, restored under the efforts of a small restoration group and Laurie Ashton. Blooming amazing is what I think it is. So that's Bacton Wood Lock for you. It's a pretty amazing result. 2 sets of gates, 1 lock chamber, water to the bottom, and a trip boat operating between the 2 locks. The challenge is to get the trip boat to be able to come through the lock chamber and move up into the next pound. So let's go and have a look up the pound and see what we can see. Right, well, we've just come there's a few hundred yards from those trees in the distance at Bacton Wood Lock. We're now at the site of Royston Bridge. There are some classic old pictures of wherries moored up here next to the old warehouse, and there is the sad remains of Royston Bridge. Now this may all look very overgrown, but underneath these reeds, which are entirely cosmetic, the channel has been completely dug out and reprofiled. This is the site of Royston Bridge. It was mined in the war should the Germans invade across North Norfolk, which was always a possibility. And the actual bridge was knocked down when the gas industry started in the North Sea, and they needed to bring heavy lorries across, so they knocked the bridge down, and there's just a kind of corrugated iron culvert running underneath. So if you want to bring boats through there, that's going to take a replacement, but we are only talking country lanes here. Well, the walk down from Royston Bridge has been quiet, just accompanied by skylark singing and the reeds rustling in the bed of the canal. But in the search for water, where the water meets the reeds, you've got to come here 400 or 500 yards up the canal. When you reach this point, this is where you find the River Ant flowing down the line of the canal. Actually, to put it more accurately, you probably got mostly the outfall of the North Walsham sewage works flowing down the line of the canal, but that seems like a pretty reasonable source of water. And as you can see, there's quite a good flow running through. Now that water runs through the bank, through a culvert, and out into the bed of the Ant that runs alongside it. So here we are, hot summer's day, with a good flow of water still running down the valley. Now it's the water flows that really trouble the Environment Agency. They're responsible for maintaining water supplies, flood defences, stuff like that. And the fact that you're running water down a canal bed obviously starts to get them a bit concerned, because is the canal bed going to hold water? Is it going to start to flood the local meadows? Will it cope with the floods? What's the crack? So before they allow water to flow down the canal, they have to be absolutely sure that where the water goes in times of storm is going to be safely delivered away. And that's the bit that the Canal Society have to work on and get sorted out. Now, I may be wrong, but I think this is kind of the area where the breach happened in the 1912 floods. But you can see that the canal runs along way off into the distance. The Canal Society have dredged it out. They've taken out all the mud, the weeds. They've got some really big boys kit. They've got loads of diggers and things, and they've scoured this out. It means it's a much better waterway than ever it was before. So the section of the canal owned by the old canal company runs all the way through from Ebridge Mill, where we started, through the restored lock at Bacton Wood, up here through and then we move all the way along to Swafield, and that's where we're going to finish this Canal Explorer walk. So this is journey's end for this edition of Canal Hunter. We've finally arrived at Swafield Road Bridge, and this is the end of the canal as far as the old canal company is concerned, and it's the end of the exploration for today. From here on, the canal is in water, but the channel is very narrow. So the section to the west of here was abandoned in 1893 and finally closed off and formally absolutely abandoned in 1923. I think the efforts of a small group of local volunteers, it's absolutely phenomenal to have got one stretch into water, to have one lock completely replaced, have another length pretty much ready to go into water, and to start work on the next lock down. That is one hell of an achievement from a small independent band of canal enthusiasts. So to all of you guys at the North Walsham and Dilham Canal Trust, big thumbs up, fantastic work. I'll carry on visiting your canal whenever I come back to Norfolk and watch the progress with huge interest. So that's a goodbye from Canal Hunter for this edition. Happy hunting, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.